What's up, guys? Scotore here to bring our new Exiles to Ray class an in-depth crash course on the olden crafting ways, as well as our veteran Exiles a bit of a refresher. I use quotations with crafting because the olden ways is mostly just heavy RNG gambling, and the purpose of in-depth crafting is to attempt to eliminate as many variables during the process as possible to increase your odds to hit usable mods in your gear. We've been spoiled with target crafting that Harvest League has provided to us, and those of you that have just started playing this league will likely have a major eye-opener to obtain the level of gear you've had access to during 3.11. I'll be going in-depth as to why we do certain things during the crafting process to help new players better understand why they are told to do things such as adding quality before linking, etc. I'm a firm believer in understanding why you do something versus just doing it because everyone else tells you to or just everyone else does it. I appreciate you guys for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. If you enjoy it and would like to see more content from me, then please hit that like and subscribe button down below. If there's something you don't quite understand, or maybe something I might have missed or may have just been blatantly wrong about, please feel free to comment down below and let me know or ask. And by all means, hit me up in my Discord server. I'll have the link in the description so you can join it and then DM me. I am more than happy to help Exiles advance in the game that I'm passionate about. I'll be putting timestamps for each section of this video in the description as well, so that way you can easily hop over to the area where you feel as though you need the most understanding or help in. So without further ado, here's what we're going to be going over. In this video, we're going to talk about the importance of item quality before going into the crafting phase itself, as well as how to obtain various quality on different pieces of gear to include jewelry, weapons, and armor. Then we're going to talk about the use of alteration orbs, augmentation orbs, chaos spamming, beast crafting. This is more the meat and potatoes of crafting overall. Then we're going to talk about slamming items. This means the use of exalted orbs, whether it be your average exalted orb or influence-based exalted orbs such as Hunter, Crusader, etc. In that same section, we're also going to talk about the use of Awakener orbs and how to go about utilizing them the best means possible. Then finally, we're going to talk about essence crafting as well as fossil crafting. Since these methods of crafting are very similar to each other, we're going to go ahead and clump them together within the same segment. The first segment we're going to talk about is item quality, the importance of it, as well as how to obtain it. So, why do we increase the quality of a piece of gear before we start crafting? Well, increased quality on, chest piece, gloves, boots, helmet, etc. Any piece of defensive gear that we have will actually increase the base defenses of that gear. So this one in particular being an armor base, as you can see, it provides just armor. The higher the quality of it, the more armor it's going to provide me. The same works for evasion rating and energy shield. The higher the quality, the more of those defenses that you are able to then scale and mitigate the incoming damage coming towards you. The same applies to weapon systems. The higher the quality to it, the more fizz damage output that weapon system's then going to put out. So this is especially important for some of you fizz-based builds, or even if you're fizz to conversion-based builds. Spellcasters, a little bit different story, but we're not going to go there. Another reason why you add quality to your gear before you start crafting is because it also makes life a lot easier when it comes to six linking. If you're currently trying to craft a chest piece or a two-handed weapon system that needs to be six linked, then this is a great opportunity for you to hit 30% quality, bench craft another 18%, and then hit it with Orb of Fusings. Now, when you're using Orbs of Fusing, which is this little doohickey right here, you have a 1 in 1,500 chance per orb to hit a 6-link. As you can see, this chest piece is already 6-linked. They actually just dropped this way, and I was needed a white piece of gear for demonstration purposes. But it also helps with 6-socketing. So jeweler's orbs, I feel like has never really been a huge issue to 6-socket an item, but it does help it. But the big money maker is Orb of Fusings onto a piece of gear that can possibly be 6-linked. And I feel like I've done like 7 or 8 6-links this league, and they've all been at 48% quality, and all of them have been under 300 fusings. Now, that's not to say you're for sure going to use less than 300 fusings. That's just saying that I've had some pretty decent luck. And remember at the beginning of this video when I said It is heavily RNG based, and we're just trying to mitigate those odds in our favor as much as possible whenever we're crafting. So I've had my fair share of cursed items that's taken multiple exalts to 6-link. Like I said, there's not a foolproof method, but it is in fact confirmed that the higher the quality you have on something, the increased odds you have of getting that 6-link. So I just want to iterate that and put that out there. So there's a number of ways you can increase quality on a piece of gear. Those are my newer players out there that are picking up all these different, you know, currency items that are just dropping around Ray class. And you're like, I don't know what this does, but it looks important, so I'll put it in my stash tab. So armor scraps are how you increase the quality of gear itself, like, you know, chest pieces, gloves, boots, helmets, etc. Whetstones are how you increase the quality of your weapon systems, from swords to wands to bows, anything that is a weapon. While it's white like this, so there's no modifiers, each hit of a whetstone or a armor scrap is going to go up by 5%. So it's cheaper to do it while the item is still white. It only costs you 4 of those pieces of currency to get to the 20%, which is technically the max, but we're going to address that in a second. So you get the 20%. Now, if the item is in fact magic, it's going to go up by 2% per hit. And if the item is rare, it'll go up by 1% per hit. The same applies to unique items. You can actually add quality to your unique pieces of gear. It'll cost one armor scrap or whetstone per 1% quality on unique gear. So same rules apply to as if it were rare. The next thing I would like to touch base on is, I'm going to talk about it, and I did say that we're going to be crafting without the use of harvest craft at all, and that's still going to be true, but something I would like to include in this video is the possibility of us getting enchantments next league, because we don't know what 3.12 is going to hold. And if they do in fact bring enchantments to, you know, the next league, is some way of getting them. As you can see on my bow here, quality does not increase physical damage. It grants 1% increased area of effect per 4% quality. Now with harvest craft leaving, then this is no longer going to be a thing unless they add it some way. So in case they do, I'm going to just say this. Obviously, the higher the quality, the higher increased, you know, area of effect I'm going to get for my bow. And there's various different enchantments out there that are quality effects, such as increased elemental damage per quality, increased attack speed per quality. So I just wanted to annotate there that's another thing that quality helps if in fact this does carry over. So going into the 30% quality process. So you can actually, this caps at 20%, right? Item is already at max quality. You can actually get it up to 30% without corrupting it. That's something we're going to talk about in a little bit as well. So with the use of perfect fossils, you have a 1 in 15 chance to hit 30% quality each time you hit a piece of gear. Now, the reason why I address this right now is every time you hit a piece of gear with a fossil, it's going to re-roll the gear. So you don't want to start crafting a gear and then be like, oh, you know what? I want 30% quality on it. I'm going to hit it with a perfect fossil, because that's going to re-roll all the mods on your gear. So I'm emphasizing now, if you want a piece of gear at 30% quality, do it before you start crafting on it. Now, whenever you hit it with a perfect fossil, like I said before, it'll be a 1 in 15 chance to hit it. It'll either land at 15%, it'll land anywhere in between, or it'll land on 30%. So we're going to hit this once, boom. Maybe it'll work. Oh, wait. All right, so we hit 23%. Now, sometimes you're going to hit 15%, sometimes you're going to hit 17%. When that happens, don't bother to waste armor scraps on it to bring it back to 20% before you hit it again, because that doesn't affect it at all. It truly does not matter how much quality is on it before you hit the perfect fossils. It's just going to land between 15 and 30. So you just keep hitting it with that until you hit your desired quality, or if you just run out of currency trying to do it. Now, usually I only recommend this for certain pieces of gear, but I'm just telling you how to go about doing this and why you do it. Usually this is more of an end game thing. If you're going to be crafting like the bow or the chest piece, like you want to get your full max use out of it, especially if it's something you plan on 6-linking that's not already 6-linked. It's always best to get it to 30% quality, and then you take that piece of gear over to your crafting bench and then you add quality to it. So let's say we put our chest piece in here. Let's say we hit 30% quality, And then you can actually bench craft. You choose a cheaper one. Don't choose an Exalt bench craft for this purpose. And you add it up to 48% quality. And then you start your 6 linking process. So that way it makes it a little bit easier. And like I said, it's been confirmed that it does in fact help. So with that, there is another way you can get 30% on your unique gear. So whenever you are beast crafting, you're out there catching beasts with Einhar, you are actually able to increase your unique gear to 30% because obviously you can't fossil craft unique gear, right? So there is a beast craft where you corrupt an item or a weapon to have 30% quality. Now this is something I was a little bit hesitant about including in this video, but I do think it's important to bring awareness to it. Usually whenever you do this craft, remember, since it's being corrupted, you can't really modify that piece of gear anymore. So usually it's just like a 6-linked, I don't know, chest piece that like you got the colors you want on it socket wise. Like it's all set up and you have nothing else to do to that piece. It's the piece, right? And then it's not 30% quality because it's unique and you can't get it like that. So you're like, you know what? I want just a slightly added, defense modifiers, maybe fizz. So we're going to go ahead and hit it with this corrupt and get 30%. It's a guaranteed 30% for that piece of gear that you get from this beast. You can always buy this beast on PoE trade, and then add them to your minigerary. I can't even pronounce it. And then you can add the 30% quality there. That is something important that I wanted to add in there. And there is also Jun crafting. So whenever you're doing your Jun missions, you get the Hillock bench craft, where whenever you're going through the safe house, you can actually increase the quality of an item to 28%. So it's not quite as good as fossil crafting, but it's something that I wanted to let you guys know about. So with that, we're going to go into jewelry quality. So you can actually add quality to your jewelry as of, I think it was the Conqueror's expansion. What was that, like 2 leagues ago or 1 league ago? I think it was 2. With the use of catalysts. So you have your catalysts that increase the quality of jewelry, such as rings, amulets, etc. Now this increases the base stats of that particular catalyst has to offer. So an example being a fertile catalyst enhances the life and mana modifiers on a ring, amulet, or belt, and it replaces the other quality type. So what that means is this implicit right now, for example, is plus 30 to maximum life. Now, if I had a tier 1 life roll, or actually even this regenerate per second roll is technically a life roll. For each 0.8% of quality I add to it that is a fertile catalyst quality, it'll increase the percent life that ring gives us. So if we max this out at 20% quality, then it's going to give us 20% added modifiers from this. So whatever 20% of 30 is, and do the maths like super fast off my head, but that's an example of that, I guess, would be my amulet right here, as you can see. So we have 20% life and mana modifiers quality on my amulet. Now, normally this amulet provides 89 to maximum life. It's tier 1 roll. However, with quality, it actually provides 106 max life now. So it's a good way of adding just a little bit more juice, a little bit more oomph to your modifiers. Now, the other important thing as to why I bring this up as well is because if you were to add the quality to it beforehand, the same rules apply. 5% per hit while it's white, 2% while it's magic, and 1% while it's rare or unique. You can add quality to unique jewelry, as you can see with this praxis here. So this actually increases your odds of hitting those particular modifiers whenever you're rolling it. So like, let's say we add it to 20%, right? And then we hit it with a transmutation orb. Now notice we maintain our 20%, and this should increase our odds of hitting that particular type of modifier, being attributes. As you can see, boom, we've already hit a strength. Now, this doesn't necessarily increase your odds of hitting a better tier of it. It just means you're going to hit that type of modifier. Now, something I would like to note is every time you hit it with an augmentation orb, you're going to lose 2% quality. And then every time you hit it with a Regal, you're going to lose 5% quality. So that's something to bear in mind whenever you're alt spamming a piece of gear. If you're going to be using a lot of augmentation orbs, and if you're trying to go with quality to increase your odds of hitting certain modifiers, you are going to lose quality by using augments and Regal orbs. So that's something I wanted to annotate. Outside of that, I hope I tried to give as much detailed information as possible as to the reason why we quality items, as well as how to go about quality items. So let's proceed to the next step. Next, we're going to go into the use of Alteration orbs, Chaos, and beast crafting methods. All right, now that we've talked about the importance of quality on gear, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of actually hitting modifiers the old school way of crafting. Now that now that a Harvest League is no longer going to be a thing and it's not going to core, so target crafting is going to be no longer an option for us. This is where heavy RNG and gambling is going to come into play. The orbs we're going to be using are Orb of Transmutation, Orb of Alteration, Augmentation, Regal Orbs, Chaos Orbs, Orb of Scouring, and Orb of Annulments. These are the main orbs that we're going to be utilizing during this phase of crafting, and these are going to be the most heavily used during this beginning process of the crafting overall, that we're going to be trying to get modifiers that we're actually seeking for. So going into a piece of gear that we're going to be crafting, as stated before, the importance of quality on it and linking and all that stuff, I'll be utilizing the websites known as PoEDB and Craft of Exile. Personally, I prefer PoEDB just because I've been using it for so long. It's just easier for me to read. The most used one I would say is probably Craft of Exile, as it gives you the odds of hitting rolls that you are seeking out, as well as how many orbs you're projected to use, possibly to hit those particular modifiers. So going into a helmet, we know that it is armor and evasion based. Now it's going to say required level 58 to use, and then most importantly, which attributes are required to wear the helmet. Now strength and dexterity based are going to be your armor and evasion. So whenever you're plugging those into PoEDB or Craft of Exile, that's how you seek out which type of base you're going to be using. So this one we identified already as strength and dexterity. That's what we choose here. So these are the possible mods we can hit. Now these other modifiers are based on what type of influences that it might have. So our helmet we saw is a hunter base. It's the little green stuff that you see floating on it, and it even has the little hunter emblems next to the name. So that means we have these modifiers available to us, as well as the base modifiers for a strength and dexterity type of helmet. So during this portion of the phase, we're just simply identifying the most important modifier we are trying to hit for a helmet. So for these purposes, let's say I want tier 1 life to start off with. Like tier 1 life is what I want. And then the next affix is, in a perfect world, I would like to hit nearby enemies have -9 to chaos res. However, I'm also okay with resistances, etc., etc. Same goes with using Craft of Exile. You can actually simply plug in which affix you want. In this case, max life. And it'll approximately take me 39 alteration orbs with the use of augmentations as well, which is really not terrible. That's not a terrible amount to actually hit the roll we want. Now, once we do that, once we have our base, we identified, okay, I want max life as my number one go-to. We're going to utilize our Orb of Transmutation. Boom. We're going to make it magic, magic. So whenever an item is magic magic rarity right now, it can have a total of 2 modifiers to it. It can have 1 prefix and 1 suffix. That's it. So whenever we're doing this, we have to keep that in mind. Right now, we just hit a prefix. So if I were to then use an Orb of Augmentation, which adds a new random modifier to an item, I will guarantee I will hit a suffix. And vice versa. If this were a suffix and I hit it with an Augmentation Orb, it will guarantee a prefix at that point. So like, let's just say this was tier 1 life, for example. I was like, yes, I hit tier 1 life. Now you'd pretty much pray that you hit a usable suffix with it. Boom. We hit tier 1 strength. Maybe my build needs strength and I'm okay with that roll. Great. We just hit 2 usable modifiers. Perfect. Then we're going to go into Regal Orbing. This will actually upgrade a magic item into a rare item, adding a 3rd modifier to it. Now, once an item is rare, it can have up to 6 affixes total. And what I mean by the word affix is both prefixes and suffixes put together. Whenever you hear someone in the community say like, oh, you know, what affix are you looking for? They're talking about both categories, prefix and suffixes. But remember, at the end of the day, an item can only have 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. And the reason why that's important to keep in mind is because that's how we're also going to be blocking certain modifiers in the next segment whenever we talk about slamming. So right now, let's say we have two great tier 1 modifiers, albeit this isn't that at all. We're just kind of using our imagination at the moment, saying we had tier 1 life and then tier 1 strength, right? So it's magic right now, which is great. Those are two modifiers that we just absolutely want. And let's say they were god tier. Like if we're crafting jeweled foil and we hit tier 1 fizz and tier 1 attack speed. Now, we don't want to ruin this item by having just god tier rolls and then Regal orbing into just completely useless modifier. So we're going to go to our miniagerie. Can't even English today. During the Beastcrafting method, we're not going to touch too much into this process, but it is something I want to, bring to your awareness, especially if you hit god tier rolls during the magic phase. You can actually imprint an item. So I don't think I don't have the beast right now, but if you're in a trade league, you can actually trade for this beast and put them in your bestiary and actually utilize this method. You have a god tier magic item. You simply create an imprint of that item with Cryatic Chimeral. And once you select this and you hit craft, it will actually spit out the beasts. You fight them, and then it'll drop a little orb, similar to the use of eternal orbs from the olden days, which will be essentially a little orb that it spits out. You just put off to the side. So that way, once you hit it with that Regal orb, and let's say you hit, I don't know, item rarity or just something that's just absolute garbage, you can actually use that orb on that item and it'll bring it back to being magic again. And then you can start completely over. Now, bear in mind, this beast is probably going to be 1 exalt, 2 exalt, kind of depending on the league and how much crafting is involved in that league. I think a harvest league is not too bad, especially since target crafting is a thing available to us. So that's something I wanted to annotate, as well as splitting an item. There's also a Beastcraft where if you do hit it with a Regal and you hit a trash item, like a trash modifier, you can actually split the item in hopes to retain both of those mods on a separate one, and then utilize your imprint to bring it back to magic to hit those two. It's a whole duping method we're not going to get too much into, but that's something I wanted to annotate there. So now that's been said, let's go ahead and Regal this piece of gear, and boom. In this particular one, we did hit tier 5 life, which is relatively usable. Usually when it comes to pieces of gear, if we do hit like a life roll or something, I like the idea of having an inherent mod that's better than what can be bench crafted. I know on fluted bassinets, specifically helmets and stuff, I believe the best bench craft is 55 life. So this is pretty close. This is going to allow us to then bench craft something else in a different category that we can utilize then. So now that this is in fact a rare item, we have 6 affixes available to us. We then go into the possibility of having to remove a specific modifier. So let's say we're not happy with this life mod, but we really do enjoy our other 2 modifiers. And let's say this was like a tier 7 life roll where it was like maybe plus 13 to maximum life. That's terrible because you can actually bench craft way more than that. So it'd be actually more beneficial to keep the other 2 modifiers, remove the life roll, and bench craft life onto it. So the way you do that is by the use of Orb of Annulment. It's going to remove a random modifier from an item. Now that we have 3 mods on this, we have a 1 in 3 chance of hitting the mod that we actually want to remove. Now, those odds at a 33% chance aren't really the greatest, and it makes me a little bit nervous, especially if the other 2 mods are tier 1 and they're just god tier. I don't want to like mess those up. So what I do is there's 2 options. Either I do take that 33% chance with an annulment orb and try and remove the modifier that we don't want, or we return to our bestiary. And there's actually 2 separate beastcrafts that we can do to help mitigate the odds toward removing the specific one we want. And those are add a suffix, remove a random prefix, as well as add a prefix, remove a random suffix. So let's say we have 2 suffixes that we want, and then that one prefix is just trash. It's like the tier 7 life roll. We can actually bench craft a better life modifier onto it. So then that means we guarantee our odds of removing that prefix. So we add a suffix and remove a random prefix, being that that's our only prefix, and that guarantees that particular mod's going to be removed. And then we just hope and pray that the random suffix that it adds is somewhat usable. So that way we can actually get some benefit use out of this. This beast in particular is Ferric Lynx Alpha, something that can be traded on from the PoE website. And then the same vice versa, you can add a prefix and then remove a random suffix. Let's say you only have 1 suffix and the other 2 prefixes are decently and usable mods that you would like to keep, then you can guarantee you removing that one suffix that you can't use with Ferric Wolf Alpha. Now, the opposite side to that is, let's say you hit tier 1 maximum life as your prefix, and then you have a decent resistance roll. Let's say you had like tier 3 fire res, and then maybe your other suffix is like item rarity, just a complete trash roll. Instead of going with the 33% route with the use of Orb of Annulments, you can actually lower that to a 50-50 shot with an add a prefix, remove a random suffix, because then at that point, the only thing you're going to be removing is either the usable resistance roll or the rarity roll, which you absolutely don't want. So this actually mitigates those odds to 50-50 instead of a 33% chance. And like I said, going into the old school ways of crafting, since that's what we're going to be doing with the update to 3.12, we are going to be reverting back to the olden ways and mitigating your odds in your favor as much as possible when it comes to gambling gear is priority. Now, the other way to roll gear toward modifiers that you do want is the use of Chaos Orbs. The most common time you're going to see people utilizing Chaos Orbs for spamming is either someone that has a lot of money, where they just have a bunch of Chaos Orbs to spam and they're just trying to hit like a really difficult mod, and they they want more than just 3 affixes. You can actually hit it with a Chaos Orb, and that's going to re-roll the entire piece of gear, and it can be anywhere between 3 modifiers to 6. I mean, you could hit it with a Chaos Orb and it gives you a full 6. You could hit it with, in this case, we hit it and it got to 4. Particularly, we're going to see this quite a bit for some of our SSF players, the guys that aren't in a trade league, and Chaos Orbs are actually used for what they're meant to be used for, and that's re-rolling a rare item completely. So you can always Chaos spam an item and try and hit as many usable mods as possible. And like I said, with the use of PoEDB, you can actually kind of target and see the weighted potential you have for those particular pieces of gear. In this case, max life being 1,000 weight, it's actually a pretty decent possibility of hitting that life roll. You have things like explodey chest pieces from a Crusader influence that are, let's say, I think it's 25 weight, which the lower the weight on it, the lower the chance you have of actually hitting that modifier. So that's pretty much all it is at the end of the day with the meat and potatoes of crafting. Next, we're going to be going into slamming items. Now we're going to discuss the use of Exalted Orbs, best known as slamming an item, as well as the use of influenced Exalted Orbs, and of course, how to use an Awkener Orb on pieces of gear. All right, guys, so now that we've done the meat and potatoes of crafting, when we talked about Alteration Orb spamming, Chaos spamming to get like the base piece of gear that we're wanting, that we're looking for, we think it's great. We're ready to do the next level of crafting, which would be utilizing Exalted Orbs. Now, using an Exalted Orb on a piece of gear is best known in the community as slamming. So whenever you slam an item, it adds a new random modifier to a rare item. Other versions is influenced Exalted Orbs, such as Crusader's Exalted Orb, Hunters, Barons, etc. What these do is it actually changes the base item into an influenced piece of gear that guarantees an influence modifier onto the item. Now, in order to use these Exalted Orbs, the item cannot have an influence already on it. So an example being this Fluted Bassinet, since it's already Hunter influenced, I cannot hit it with a Crusader's Exalted Orb, or I can't hit it with another Hunter Orb to add another influence modifier. Something like this chest piece that doesn't have any influence on it, I can hit this with a Crusader's Exalted Orb. That would change this base into a Crusader chest piece, which would guarantee a Crusader influence onto it and a Crusader influence modifier onto it. We're also going to talk about Awakener's Orbs and how to use those. So going into this, whenever you're slamming an item, you want to do it sparingly, especially if you're an SSF player, you're not part of a trade league. That means Exalted Orbs are not going to be like readily available to you all the time. So you want to be very picky as to what you choose to slam with them. Depending on how much you play, you may have anywhere between 2 to 10 Exalted Orbs across a 3-month league period. So if you're in a trade league, you can have a bunch of them from just trading and selling stuff and being able to slam whatever you want to slam. But that's neither here nor there. Looking at an item, if we have like, let's say we have a 5 affix item such as this, we have one open prefix, no open suffixes. As we stated before, you can have a total of 6 affixes total, and that's 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. So if we were to hit this item with an Exalted Orb right now, we would guarantee a prefix to hit. Now, what we use is PoEDB, or you could use Craft of Exile. For these purposes, I'm going to use PoEDB just because that's what I'm the most familiar with. Looking at this item, since we know for sure it's going to be a prefix that we hit, since our suffixes are filled, the way you look at this is by hovering over it and hitting the Alt button. If you're not seeing that, you can always bring up options in your UI and make sure you enable the modifiers. Where is it? Yeah, advanced mod descriptions. Make sure this is enabled so that way you can actually view the details as to whether or not something's a suffix, prefix, etc. So if you're not seeing that, then just check your options menu and you'll be able to adjust fire accordingly. So we've actually landed a % armor, a % defense, and a hybrid life. Those are the 2 prefixes that we currently have on this chest piece that is not influenced. So we bring up PoEDB and body armors that are strength. So we have a % armor already, and we have a hybrid life, armor life, right? So that means when we slam this item with an Exalted Orb, we cannot hit another one of these 2. That means the only things we could hit is any one of these life modifiers, which is a lot. That's very risky. A flat armor, potentially. Actually, I don't even think it would count. Base local defenses, defense %. So yeah, I guess we could still, right? And then there's also reflect phys damage to melee attackers. So something that you want to identify is the mod group of an item. So since we do have a hybrid life roll on this item, that means this mod group cannot appear on this item again. So when we slam into it, anything that is identified on this that has that same mod group cannot be rolled. So we're probably going to hit either a max life, a reflect, or potentially a flat armor or something if we were to slam into that. Now, if we were to actually slam this with a Crusader's Exalted Orb, we're going to guarantee a Crusader prefix modifier. So then we look at PoEDB again, and since we're influencing it with a Crusader Orb, that means we could either hit increase max mana, pretty much any of these. Since the item is not already influenced, any of these prefixes are open. And remember, we cannot hit any of these suffixes since we already have 3 suffixes on this item. So in a perfect world, we would probably hit this Explodey chest. The weight on this is a 25, as I think we addressed that in the last segment. So the odds of actually hitting this one are incredibly low. 25 weight versus something that's like mana, which is 500 per, etc., etc. 500 per here. This is not a terrible roll to hit, but we're not really talking too much about preferred rolls. So you will guarantee one of these modifiers to hit whenever you hit it with a influenced Exalted Orb. Now, let's talk about ways we can kind of increase our odds of hitting rolls that we want to hit. So whenever we are crafting, I don't know, let's go back to our helmet, right? So we have 3 suffixes and 1 prefix. So we're thinking to ourselves, let's say all of these are mods that we absolutely want. We want all of these mods. They're perfect for our build and stuff like that, right? How do we get a prefix that we want? So what we do is we take it to the crafting bench and we look at possible mods that we want to block to increase our chances of hitting mods that we want. So right now our prefix roll is lightning damage to spells, right? So we bring up our helmets, strength, dexterity. And remember, we have all these prefixes open as well as our hunter prefixes. So it looks like we have a hunter prefix of lightning damage to spells. Let's say I don't like my chances of in a perfect world, I would love tier 1 life roll, right? But my odds of hitting a good version of life roll are pretty low. And I'm also just kind of happy with bench crafting life onto it. So let's say maybe I want to hit, I don't know, maybe like a hybrid life or something like that inherent, or maybe I want to hit something else. If I want to block the life roll so that way I keep myself from hitting a terrible life roll, I can actually go ahead and just bench craft the lowest tier here. We'll put 25 max life on it. There. So now that that's bench crafted onto it, if I were to slam this, then there's no way that I'm going to hit a maximum life roll unless it's one of the hybrid lives, which In our book, I think it would be okay to hit a hybrid life roll, because a hybrid life roll that are inherent, even if it's the worst variant, is probably going to be better than the bench crafted hybrid life roll. So that's just an example of it. I think personally, I probably wouldn't really do that. But that's the basic concept behind blocking something. So if a modifier already exists on a piece of gear, then it can't add another version of that exact same modifier. So if we were trying to block, I don't know, max mana, maybe if we were to slam this and we don't want to hit mana, then we add like a mana benchcraft to it. I don't think helmets have those, but that's more prevalent for like, I don't know, belts and rings and stuff like that. That's like the process of blocking affixes. Now, going into Awakener's orbs. Whenever we're using an Awakener orb on a piece of gear, that is how you guarantee 2 modifiers on one piece of gear that you want. So like these gloves, for example, have the Warlord's increased damage over time, and it has the Hunter's chaos damage over time multiplier. Now, if I want a pair of gloves that guarantee both of those modifiers on it, I will use an Awakener's orb to hit one pair of glove that has one of those mods on one of those type of influences, and then hit the other pair, which is the other influence with the other modifier, and that'll fuse those two together and guarantee those 2 modifiers to be on that pair of gloves. Now, all of the other modifiers, whenever you do that are on that pair of gloves, are going to be random. Whenever you fuse something with an Awakener's orb, it'll guarantee those 2, and then it'll randomly roll the other modifiers. How many modifiers is completely random. It might turn into like a 5 affix item. It might be 4 affixes. It might even be 6. So what the other modifiers are, purely RNG based, like I said before, kind of back to the gambling methods when we're crafting. So the way you do that is they don't have to be rare. Whenever you have identified 2 items or 2 modifiers that you want, let's say on a pair of boots, for example, let's say we want, I don't know, 2-tone boots that have avoid fire damage from hits. Now, this is an of the conquest modifier, as you can see, and it is a warlord specific modifier. So you don't want to have any other warlord mods on here. If you have 2 warlords on here, it'll be a 50-50 shot for you to actually carry over the mod that you want. So just keep it magic and keep just the only influence mod on this piece of gear, the one that you want. Same applies to the other one. It has to be a different, I repeat, it has to be a different influence. You can't have 2 warlords and then Awakener orb them together. You can't have 2 shapers, Awakener orb together. You can't do that. It has to be 2 separate influences. And this one in particular has of the shaping, which is a shaper specific modifier, chance to avoid projectiles. Now let's say my new pair of boots, I want both of those put together. I'm going to right click the Awakener's orb. I'm going to click on the pair of boots that I'm okay with poofing. It's going to go away and disappear. Doesn't matter what the base is. All that matters is the modifier. And then the pair of boots that I want to keep, the base, whether it be an astral plate or two-tone pair of boots, that's the second item that you click. That's very important, because if you were to perfect fossil craft a pair of boots to 30% quality, and that's the base that you want to keep, make sure that's the base that's hit second with the Awakener's orb. So once you fuse these 2 together, it'll turn into a rare item carrying both of these specifically influence modifiers over, and all the other ones being reforged into, you know, pray that they're usable mods, essentially. So that's the use of slamming. Let's go into our next segment, which is going to be fossil crafting and essence crafting. Finally, we're going to discuss how to use essence crafting as well as fossil crafting on pieces of gear to get specific mods we are seeking. All right, guys, now that we've talked about slamming and the base premise of like alteration orb spamming, chaos spamming, etc., we're going to go into essence crafting and fossil crafting. The reason why we're combining both of these into the same segment is because the base premise behind this crafting method is essentially the same, as in the sense that you're hitting an item and it's reforging all toward a specific target type of craft. It's not target crafting in the harvest sense, but it is target crafting nonetheless. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with essence crafting. So we're going to be working on a ring specifically, and the reason why we would use an essence craft is because there are modifiers specific to essences that can't be inherently rolled via alteration orb spamming. So let's go ahead and bring up rings. Now, in PoEDB, you can also do this with Craft of Exile. This is what we're going to use for our fossil crafting segment. But for Essence, it's easier just to look at PoEDB. These are the possible modifiers that you can get from Essence types. And this will even tell you which Essence provides that particular modifier. So being that I'm a Chaos build, if I were ES based instead of Life, we'll just say Moonstone Ring for the sake of the video. I'm going to want Chaos increased Chaos damage. So boom, this is an Essence specific mod. You can't hit this modifier from Alteration Orb spamming or any other means. The only way to get that is from hitting it with an Essence. And in order to identify that Essence, it's a Deafening Essence of Envy. Now there's multiple different tiers of increased Chaos damage, which will tell you which tier of Envy Essence we need, whether it be Screaming, Shrieking, or Deafening. So we're going to essentially then go look at our Essence tab. If you don't have an Essence tab and just any one of your other tabs that you do keep your essences in. So we do have Envies. Probably not going to use my Deafening Essence here, but I'm okay with using like a Screaming Essence. You can also, instead of using PoEDB, you can always literally just hover over each one of these essences and it'll tell you exactly what modifiers you can hit on what types of gear. So like if we hit a ring with a Deafening Essence of Greed, it falls under the other jewelry category and we would land regenerate 15 to 18 life per second. It's a variant between those rolls, but you'll guarantee somewhere between 15 and 18 life per second. Just like the Screaming Essence of Envy will guarantee us 23 to 26% increased Chaos damage. So being that we've selected our particular essence that we're going to be using, we are going to go ahead and make sure the item is white. If it is rare, I don't believe it works. I guess we're going to test it out here. We hit it with an essence. Target item, not normal rarity. So it does have to be a normal item. So boom. Once we hit it, it's kind of like hitting it with an alchemy orb. It reforges the item from normal rarity to a rare item. So we're going to hit it with an essence. Boom. So we guaranteed our 24% increased chaos damage. Like I said before, it will land somewhere between 23 and 26, as it says on the essence itself. This one in particular hit 24%. And then all the other modifiers are random. Now, that life modifier being a tier 2 life roll on an essence hit, that's actually pretty solid. The other modifiers are like, not the greatest, especially since it is a Moonstone Ring. In fact, that life modifier is probably trash, since if I'm using a Moonstone Ring, that means I'm probably an energy shield base. But we're not talking about the type bases. We're just essentially talking about the entire purpose behind essence crafting. And that's literally it. If you don't like those mods, then you just use an Orb of Scouring, which is then going to turn it back to a normal item. And then you hit it with an essence again. Now we did hit a max energy shield roll. It's a terrible one, tier 11. But then we got a 26% increased chaos damage there, which is the top of that percent roll. That's it. It's literally just gambling. You buy more of these and you hit it until you hit usable mods. You're going to guarantee the hit of increased chaos damage, and then you're just hoping the other mods are something that's usable. So then we're going to hit it again. Lightning damage, probably not going to be usable. We actually did hit a okay energy shield roll, so like we'll go ahead and take it, but that's the base premise there. Now another thing we could look at is, now we're going to talk about fossil crafting. Same premise. Essentially, you are going to re-roll an item completely, target crafting specific modifier types. Now we're going to be using 2 fossils in this particular example, and we're going to talk about the 2 different types of resonators that you could use. So going into this type of craft, we're going to want, since it's a hunter influence base, we're going to use Craft of Exile for this particular craft. We're going to reset our whatever stats we had. We're going to look at helmets, and we're going to look at strength dexterity base, and we're going to be fossil crafting, right? And we're also going to identify this helmet as hunter. So we want -9. Oh, we're going to add this influence to it. We want -9, and then we want preferably tier 1 life, right? So let's say those are the 2 most important modifiers to us for a helmet. We want tier 1 life, nearby enemies have -9 to chaos res. So if we were to just chaos orb spam, it looks like it's not the greatest odds here. So what we're going to try and do is compute best selection of fossils in order to get these modifiers, which is actually surprisingly not too terribly difficult. So then it's going to spit us out the best possible ways to hit that mod and how many tries it's going to potentially take. Now, realistically speaking, I'm probably not going to use a 4-socket resonator 61 times, being that a 4-socket resonator is usually somewhere between 75 to like 80 chaos per hit. That's a lot of money. But if I do want to increase my odds of hitting tier 1 life and -9, bear in mind I'm also probably okay with like a tier 3 life, so it kind of opens up the variables there. But these are your best odds for hitting those particular mods and the number of tries per use. So if I were to get an aberrant, corroded, pristine, and a sanctified, that's going to result in 61 tries average to hit the rolls I want, and it goes down accordingly. Now, you can also just go with the cheaper route, which is what I usually do, especially when I'm trying to target hit those modifiers. We're going to go ahead and scour this helmet, and I want pristine fossils, which says more life modifiers, and I want more chaos modifiers. I don't really care about lightning res, so I'm okay with no lightning. I also don't really care about the hybrid defenses and stuff like that now, as I could probably just benchcraft those, so no armor, ES, or evasion. You can also identify via the other fossil types as to what they provide. If you are also seeking maybe a cold resistance, you can even throw a frigid fossil in there and utilize a 3-socket resonator. However, for this example's purposes and the entire idea behind utilizing this crafting method, we're just going to go with these two. Now, if you use a alchemical resonator, I swear guys, I can English. This is going to change an item from normal quality into rare. And if you use a chaotic resonator, it's essentially like hitting it with a chaos orb, which is going to re-roll an already rare item into another rare item, utilizing the fossils that you plugged into it. So we're going to hit it with a alchemical resonator, so that way we can turn it from normal into rare with the odds of hitting a life roll and hopefully -9 to nearby enemies for chaos res. If not, we'll probably also hit a chaos resistance roll. So boom. So we did actually hit a decent life roll, tier 3 life, but we did end up hitting a chaos resistance. Now that it's already rare, I could either scour it and then do another one of these, or I can just re-roll it as is with one of the chaotic resonators instead. So we're going to hit it again. So we did hit our life roll, and we did hit a chaos roll, which is a prefix chaos damage to spells. And then we just keep going as that same way accordingly. It's going to primarily target craft life, prioritizing chaos as well. You keep doing that, etc., until you hit the mods you need. As I stated before, according to Craft of Exile, our odds of hitting that are fairly low doing it that way. You can also, better guarantee your odds with the suggested routes. For cost efficiency, the exact same way we're doing it, the number one way is aberrant fossil with pristine, which is how we were doing with the 2 sockets. In order to hit the tier 1 variant with that is possibly 600 tries. But like I said, we're usually kind of okay with like a tier 3 life roll also. So that kind of opens up those odds just a little bit. But yeah, that's literally the base premise behind essence crafting and fossil crafting. I know it's super like RNG based, and there's really no like best ways to try and target craft in that means, but these are the old school ways. This is how we came up doing crafting, especially with essence and fossil crafting. Blocking via fossils is probably the more superior route in order to get modifiers that you're currently seeking. And like I said, with the use of Craft of Exile, really helps you not have to like puzzle piece which fossils synergize best with each other in order to get the desired modifiers. You literally just plug in the mods you want on the website and it'll tell you the fossils that give you the best odds to hit those modifiers. Some things that we didn't quite cover before ending this video that I do want to touch base on is divine orbing. The divine orb is the way you obtain these is by just vendoring a 6-linked item to any vendor. They'll give you a divine orb for that vendor. We're not going to necessarily do it, but there it is. They also could potentially drop when you're just mapping or progressing through the storyline, etc. What a divine orb does is randomizes the numeric values of the random modifiers on an item. So if you have six modifiers on an item, and if you hit it with a divine orb, it's going to re-roll the numeric values of each of the modifiers. It's not going to change the modifiers. it's just going to re-roll the numeric value. So as you can see on this chest piece or this, let's go ahead and talk about this amulet. Right now we have pretty much perfect mods where we want them, right? So we have 89 to max life, and the best roll is 89. But let's say that was 80 to max life, and we wanted to hit 89. You just hit it with a divine orb, and then it'll re-roll those toward, like, all the modifiers, the numeric value in them toward the highest cap in that same tier. It does not re-roll the tier itself. So if you have a tier 7 life roll and you hit it with a divine orb, it will not change that tier into like a 5 or a 1 or something like that. It stays within the same tier and just re-rolls the numeric values. So that's about it. We've covered all of the bases when it comes to crafting. I'm sure I might have missed one or two things. If I did, and if you are curious about any of the methods that we did cover, please feel free to ask in the comments down below. I truly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your days to watch this video and, you know, learn a thing or two about the olden ways of crafting, especially since we're going to be going back to those methods with the new league. I don't know yet if new crafting methods are going to be available to us with the new league. There might be, and a lot of the aspects in this video might become, you know, null and void if there's an easier means. Maybe we get another version of Harvest or something. Who knows? But if there's something more that you would like to get elaboration on, feel free to ask in the comments or DM me on Discord. I'm more than happy to help out new Exiles as well as seasoned Exiles. Thank you guys for tuning in.